brief walk through the centre of Madrid will quickly reveal the anger and disappointment driving a new wave of European emigration. With over 5 million unemployed, a harsh austerity budget, and corruption scandals amongst the highest political circles, outraged citizens have spilled onto the streets. There are now daily demonstrations in the Spanish capital. These young doctors are protesting against the privatization of hospitals. Nearby, the employees of a public television station protest severe job cuts, in which the majority of the staff have been laid off. We will have to go elsewhere. There are no jobs. 925 of us lost our jobs. Some were employees who have worked here 15 or 20 years. I'm 47, not young. Where should I go? Abroad? Into a flat with 5-year-old children? It's upsetting. Javier Romero is a software engineer. His company is cutting back on staff. As a result, he's considering emigrating with his wife Adriana to Austria. Since the banking crisis in 2008, 300,000 Spaniards have already left the country, mainly moving to other EU countries. I received a message that there is an Austrian company looking for skilled workers. One of the offers fit my profile and I applied. After the first interview, the company invited me to Austria. I will make a decision only when I've been there, when I know what conditions the company offers me. The job was not advertised. Instead, on an initiative of the Austrian Chamber of Commerce, a delegation of entrepreneurs travelled to Spain to personally select the candidates. The Austrian trade delegation in Madrid coordinated the process. We have now run 3 of these initiatives, together with the Chamber of Engineers and the engineer universities. In contrast to the German and Swiss delegations, we represent committed companies with specific job opportunities. Why are we here instead of Portugal or Greece? Portugal, it must be said, has an excellent workforce, but they often go to Angola and Mozambique, where they have good relations, and because these countries are currently experiencing enormous booms. As unthinkable as it may have seemed only 6 years ago, the Portuguese capital Lisbon is experiencing an unusual new trend. EU citizens queue outside African embassies to apply for working visas. The former Portuguese colonies of Angola and Mozambique are, along with Brazil, the most popular destinations for Portuguese citizens outside the EU. The number of immigrants has tripled since last year. Difficult times in Portugal have triggered a wave of immigration, the like of which hasn't been seen for half a century. As of the beginning of 2013, the Mozambican government has tightened entry regulations. Those who have not been granted a visa in their country of origin will be turned back at the airport. What is it about Mozambique in particular that so many are finding so attractive? The country is one of the poorest in the world. Half the population lives on about €1 a day. However, Mozambique is in the midst of a boom, mainly thanks to the discovery of huge gas fields and coal deposits in the north of the country. The large projects have attracted international investors, and skilled workers are urgently needed. I have found work here in the finance department of the bank. It's a job I've always wanted, but in Portugal at the moment it's absolutely impossible. No one is hired. Soon after I arrived, 3 friends came to visit me. They came as tourists. They've just completed their training and are here on holiday. But of course they will spend the whole week with a job. Of course. If you're open and adapt to the local way of life, it's a great city. Foreign nationals need travel documents, and a stay in the capital requires a visa. Vast amounts of money are currently flowing into Mozambique from China, Brazil, India, and Europe. As Western economies stagnated in 2012, the Mozambique economy grew by 8%. Several Portuguese construction companies, unable to find contracts in the Eurozone, are now successfully operating in Mozambique. Many of the Portuguese migrants arrived after following these firms. Not all are employed legitimately and prefer not to be interviewed. The majority don't see themselves as immigrants. We are not here for our entire lives, only temporarily. I am not here to lay down roots. I'm only here because I have been forced to emigrate. I would never voluntarily come here. You won't stay? No, my intention is to return to Portugal once the situation there has improved. When will that be? First it was 2013, now they say 2014. We'll see. How quickly the fate of a country can change is nowhere more apparent than here in Mozambique. The country was only released from Portuguese colonial rule in 1975. This was followed by a bloody civil war. Peace has only been known here for 20 years. There remains a great deal of suffering. 1 in 10 Mozambicans are HIV positive. 1.5 million children have lost their parents to AIDS. But there have been successes in combating the epidemic, often thanks to the work of international organizations such as DREAM. The personnel manager of the organization, Antonia Jorge, has become accustomed to dealing with foreigners through her work. Her colleague is from Bulgaria, and the cafe where they breakfast together every day is a favorite haunt of Europeans, in the center of the capital, Maputo. We always had a very different view of the Europeans. We have never seen them as people who need to come to Africa to find a better life. And now, all of the Portuguese. That is the irony of history. They first come to colonize us. The fact that we can help them today, I find somehow rather interesting. This new migration movement brings change itself. There is a new story. Emigrants are generally risk-averse and committed. They invest their expertise into their fresh start and can sometimes contribute more to the development of a country than professional aid workers. Businesswoman Celia Andre used to work in the tourism industry in Portugal. In Mozambique, she has opened the country's first fashion outlet, located in Maputo. The company is a joint venture with Mozambican partners. This enables Celia to benefit from state investments. Celia has discovered a market niche. Startups that meet demand and create jobs are promoted. Employees are solely Mozambican. There was nothing similar in Mozambique. Most dresses that are sold are second-hand goods from European used clothing collections of very low quality. Here we offer branded products in all price ranges for all strata of society. Used shoes collected in Western nations for the world's poor are for sale on the streets. The expanding gap between rich and poor is evident everywhere, but a new middle class has been created. Celia sends her children to private school which is managed and financed by the Portuguese government. Mozambique is considered a peaceful country, and the crime rate is relatively low. The country has become particularly popular for Portuguese immigrants with families. The expat school building is bursting at the seams. Originally intended for 500 students, it now has to accommodate 1,500 children. Juliana Fleming is new here. She already had a contract of employment before she left Lisbon. Her husband is an architect and is still job hunting. For the time being at least, they both have to survive on one salary. When we came from Portugal, as most do, we sought a room in a family home looking for lodgers. We rent a room there because the rental prices for apartments are way too high. I know many people, often older than me, up to 60 years old, who are trying to sell their homes to then settle here in Mozambique, which is difficult due to the crisis in Portugal. Anyone who believes Mozambique to be a new El Dorado will be sadly disappointed. The cost of living is high and the job search is difficult. Legally, only 1 in 10 employees on a workforce may be foreign nationals, the result of a quota system put in place for the protection of the local population. But Mozambique remains a hospitable country and is home to a melting pot of cultures. This is the pre-wedding celebration for a Brazilian bride marrying a Portuguese husband. The Mozambican musicians invited to perform stress that they have nothing against their former colonial masters. We need to be forgiving. They did not know what they were doing. We forgive. We Mozambicans are not resentful. The next morning, the couple are married by the Portuguese consul. The ceremony must be completed quickly because the consul is hugely busy. Each month, the consulate registers more than 150 new arrivals. The diplomat sees a lot of positives in the emigration of his countrymen to Mozambique, Angola and Brazil. These emigrants contribute to the growth of our trade relations and our investments. These 3 countries currently flourish, while Europe, to say the least, has stagnated. The money that every emigrant sends to Portugal has always been important to our country, and it's now even more important. Another advantage is that Portuguese-owned companies in Mozambique import goods from Portugal. This is good for our exports. About €2 billion flow home to Portugal every year from expat Portuguese nationals. Portugal has benefited from the exodus of its people, but each emigrant takes a high risk. Sarah Martins knows it will be a long time before the loans needed to start her bakery have been paid off. Only then will she be able to send money home. Sarah started with nothing and had to train her employees from scratch. Even so, as an employer in this booming country, Sarah felt optimistic about her chances, while in Europe, only pessimism prevails.
As pessoas estão tristes, estão à procura de novas oportunidades.
The Portuguese are sad now. There it is not easy to see new perspectives. But you have to take a step forward. Dare to invest and emigrate if it is possible. You have to think positive. One should not lose hope.
Mas é preciso ter o pensamento positivo e não perder a esperança. Nós os africanos,
We Africans do not suffer from depression, even if we have nothing to eat, or our depression is less visible. How is it with you? Europeans are depressed because of the crisis? And how do they deal with their depressive symptoms? They take drugs, therapy, or they dance? What do the Europeans do not to fall into the mood of a crisis? It has already been a few years since the crisis, and we can't yet see when the situation will improve. What do the Europeans do? In Spain, the suicide rate since the economic crisis erupted has risen by a third. Many have taken their own lives because they are unemployed, deeply in debt, and threatened with eviction. 400,000 Spaniards have lost their homes due to unpaid mortgages. Every day, another 500 are evicted. The laws give the person concerned no protection. In mid-March, the European Court found that the evictions in Spain break EU law. The EU ruling was made after the massive protests of a citizens' initiative. Activists have collected over 500,000 signatures. Before their departure for Austria, Javier and Adriana also want to contribute. We will sign so that the mortgage law is reformed. If the bank can take away your home because you cannot pay your mortgage, the debts are not repaid. That person must continue to pay off the loan and remain enslaved for life. People are angry because the government does nothing to fight the issues the mortgage problem is creating, nor against youth unemployment. The result is a talent drain. The most talented workers begin to look elsewhere for their future. The Spanish Labour Department has downplayed the problem. According to this indignant activist, the minister believes talented young people leave the country only in the spirit of adventure. Spain is polarized. Only a few streets away, Javier and Adriana encounter a manifestation of Spanish nationalism. They fear that Spain is falling apart. Too often, it's assumed emigrants have betrayed the homeland. Javier feels it's therefore important to explain his decision. I want to leave because I do not see any prospects for the future. Companies benefit from exploiting employees. I know what I'm talking about. I've worked for years in the IT industry. If everyone left the country, the ship would sink. Someone has to stay in order to save it. But look at the high unemployment rate. Even if his work is free, already another is waiting for it. And also my post gets quickly filled. You are right, it would be better to stay here if there was enough work. But at this point, we don't hurt anyone when we emigrate. Javier was born in the Canary Islands and raised in southern Andalusia. Adriana comes from Ecuador and studied in London. They belong to a new generation that is not afraid of relocating. They are used to packing their bags. Let's take leave of Madrid. We have lived here a couple of years. Now we can begin a new life. It's here in St. Johann, Austria, that Javier is looking to build his new life. This is the crucial day of his visit to his prospective employer's headquarters. Can the Spaniard feel at home here? He hopes the visit to the company will bring clarity. He is with the Basque applicant, Patxi Asperos, both selected from the many candidates. There are several posts that need to be filled.
Hello, nice to see you again. Hello.
We had the job advertised for 1 week in Spain, and we had over 100 entries, all technicians with degrees who have applied for this position. This is certainly a number of applications that we cannot achieve in Austria advertising for months. Good IT workers are always in demand in Austria. In just the last 4 years, the Pongauer software company has created 150 jobs. New employees come from many different countries, including Greece. The unemployment rate for young people in Greece is more than 50%, and it is 25% in general. And most people are trying to find a job abroad. It's not always easy. That's why I feel very lucky that I found a job so quickly in Austria. We already have people from many different countries, most European, but some from non-EU countries, from very different cultures. We see this as a strong enrichment and as an opening up of the provincial mentality of the Salzburg mountain region in the direction of a wider sales market and a greater cultural diversity. And we see that as an advantage. The company strives to ensure that the introduction of the new arrivals is as pleasant as possible. They receive German lessons and support in finding accommodation. In St. Johann, you can expect a small apartment for about €500 a month. But I would like 2 bedrooms to have guests. Possibly because my friends will want to visit. This exodus of young graduates from Europe's crisis regions has brought massive benefits to their destination countries. If these workers return when it picks up again in Spain, I hope for the Austrian companies that they do not go back, because these workers are an asset for us in Austria, for 2 reasons. First, because they are well trained. Secondly, because we also need these people, and because of the future. They are our bridge to Latin America. The booming region is not Europe in the future. Not the EU, it is the BRIC countries, particularly Brazil, but also all of South America. Is history repeating itself? By the middle of the 20th century, millions of Europeans fled hunger, war, and persecution to Latin America. The economic and political situation on the whole American continent was better than in old Europe. More than 90% of Argentinians are descended from these European immigrants. Even today, Argentina has a great understanding of immigration as a country, even if only 4% of the population are first-generation migrants. Everyone's right to emigrate is made or guaranteed by the Constitution. Long queues form at the immigration office. Immigrants need nothing more than their passport and a police certificate. A new law guarantees them the right to healthcare and education, and allows them to stay even if they have no work. Lately, people mostly come from the poorer neighboring countries Paraguay, Peru, and Bolivia, often finding work as laborers. The rise of European immigrants is a recent phenomenon, reminiscent of old times. Carlos Blanco has packed his bags in Spain after having seen the restaurants where he worked as a chef go bankrupt, one after the other. He is determined to find success in the new world. You arrive with your passport to the immigration office. You pay, and you have a temporary work permit, and soon you have all the papers. No problem, immediately. I started to work legally a week after my arrival. In Spain, the immigrants were first recorded, allowed to work illegally because the economy benefited. Later, they were legalized because the government wanted them to become taxpayers. And now, in the crisis, they are pushing the migrants back out from Spain. The immigrant is used and exploited. Carlos is not homesick. The common language and similar customs have made adjusting to life here easy. You walk here in the center of Buenos Aires, and you feel like you're in Spain. I strongly recommend it to anyone traveling in Spain who sees no future prospects. Why not emigrate? You can still go back to your starting point at any time. On the opposite bank of the Rio de la Plata is Montevideo. The capital of Uruguay was a safe haven for Europeans in difficult times. The pace of life is slower here than in neighboring Argentina. The economic situation is stable, but the cost of living is high and salaries are modest. The new economic migrants from Europe must be content with little, according to young architect Patricia Bastan. It's as if you have nowhere to go, because you cannot return to Spain. At home they say, do not come back, the situation is terrible. And here you are a stranger, alone, and you know no one who will help. The Uruguayan Catalan met her boyfriend in Montevideo. He is a professional footballer, but currently has no safe job. We live in a room in a shared apartment. I pay half my salary for the rent, nearly 10,000 pesos. It is 400 euros. My money does not last until the end of the month. I do not have papers. In Barcelona, I always worked cash in hand. I was never registered. Since my 18th birthday, I worked in architecture studios, and no one wanted to deal with me legally. Employers do not want to commit themselves. They profit from the illegal work. Again, I'm working illegally. I had a 3-month trial period, passed, and I should now be employed, but the probationary period has been extended by 2 months. Crises are known in this part of the world too well. 10 years ago, many countries in South America were virtually bankrupt. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced to leave the country. Many found work in Europe, especially in Spain. Now, however, as the economy flourishes in Uruguay, many are returning. Ernesto de la Pean knows from personal experience how quickly the wheel of fate can turn. The artisan makes clocks that tick differently. They rotate counterclockwise, the southern tip of South America facing up. Who says that the south must always be on the bottom? Ernesto's grandparents moved from Italy to South America in the early 20th century. He has worked for a few years in Europe. Back in his homeland, he has made a name with his reverse watches. We're experiencing a phase in which there was always growth, and Europe would not cut back on consumption levels. We have lived here for a long time on the back burner, with much sacrifice. We need a better balance on this planet, less consumption, and remember that many people still live in extreme poverty on this earth. Here in Montevideo, there is a lack of skilled manpower for the booming construction industry. The government has launched a campaign to encourage Uruguayan immigrants to return. The majority of the people who leave the crisis areas in Europe are former immigrants returning to their countries of origin. I had to return because of the crisis. I was out of work in Spain. This snack shop belongs to an Argentinian who emigrated to Spain 10 years ago, who has recently landed back in Montevideo. I left Buenos Aires in search of a future for my family. All of them were economically dependent on me. I had been doing well in Spain and could look after my parents and siblings. Now they have stayed in Europe. I have a brother in Italy. My parents are still in Spain because they have no means to return. Sometimes not even money for food. My mother is the only one of the family who still has a job. The others are unemployed. They experience yet another crisis firsthand. I say, you have caused the crisis. I find it ridiculous that my parents, uncles and aunts say that today's youth are lazy. They will return to the family home, they do not fight, they do not understand politics. I say, wait a minute, you criticize us, but actually you are responsible for the crisis. We have left the nest and have found this. Back to Europe, to St. Johann, Salzburg. The 2 Spanish engineers have signed their contracts. Soon, their lives will be here. I think we can consider ourselves privileged, although we had to emigrate. But this can be an enriching experience. Yes, at least we had a choice. This is a privilege that not many have.